we're our own worst enemy when we put sanctions. We invite Russia and China to take the kind of actions that you described by imposing sanctions on everyone, right? And that makes them want to have an alternative system.
Welcome back to Metals and Miners. I'm its founder and its host, Gary Bohm. We have a fantastic discussion lined up today that I'm really eager for. Today, we're fortunate to have with us Steve Levine. Steve runs The Electric. It's a publication focused on crucial industries for the energy transition, including next-generation batteries, electric vehicles, and autonomous driving. He's launched and ran multiple successful digital publications. Steve has also held various positions at the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Georgetown University, and more during his illustrious career. Steve, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Gary.
So we're going to have a deep discussion about the electrification of everything, the battle for the needed metals to make that happen, and more. Let's begin with the global competition for raw materials. The global competition is just continuing to increase as everyone, China, India, other emerging markets, in addition to the Western nations, are looking to build out and update their electrical grids for electric vehicles and artificial intelligence. Would you speak into this global competition? Is it the new arms race? How do you see this?
Yeah, that's a pretty good way of framing it. It's an arms race, except it was the sound, for a long time, it was the sound of one hand clapping, China's hand. The United States and China began this race at the same time, around 2009, 2010. The U.S. dropped out about 2012 because of our, it seems like we're in especially polarized politics now. We also were then. And that's why that happened. But China kept going. China went around the world. Chinese companies backed by the Chinese government went around the world, like to the Lithium Triangle in South America, to Indonesia, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and snapped up the rights to battery metals, right? Nickel, cobalt, manganese, and lithium. And then at the same time, they funded the capacity to process these metals, right? So anyone could go around accumulating the rights to the metals. So they seem to kind of have known that. But what they did, they're commanding heights. The reason they're in the catbird seat right now is that they concurrently built up the processing capacity and today totally dominate that middle ground. 100% of battery grade graphite, more than half of the nickel, and all of the iron-based cathodes, LFP it's called. And so but to bring it into what you said, which was sort of the Cold War of battery metals, right? The U.S. woke up about 3-4 years ago, and we're starting out can be slow, but the U.S. did start out, and the government put a lot of money behind it, right? Like, I mean, you got to count it up. It matters how many companies avail of it. So there's not an exact number, but it's hundreds of billions of dollars. It's the largest industrial investment by the United States, peacetime investment ever. Not just, often it's said since World War II. It's not since World War II. It's ever. And so that kind of sets the ground for where we are right now.
Yeah. Amazing how the journey has twists and turns, and how a decade out of the loop can really push you far behind in the race. So, Steve, it appears that the USA is increasingly getting cut out of trade relationships as China, India, Brazil, Japan, and others, they're focusing on sending finished goods and manufactured products to emerging markets in exchange for getting raw materials shipped back to them. The more the USA gets cut out of the trade flow, the worse it'll get for the USA consumer and the economy. You know, inflation is going to go higher. Are you seeing a similar bifurcating trade trend occurring? And do you expect that to intensify from here, or do you expect that to, what I would use the word is more normalize?
Well, there's no doubt that the at least for now the politics lean toward bifurcation of trade flows. In other words, we're moving away from a friendly trade relationship with China and all of the reverberations of those in other relationships that you're describing. That's the way it looks now. I mean, this is a bipartisan trend, right? Both parties are China bashers, and so unless that changes, that's the way it's going to be. I don't think we're being very smart about establishing a U.S. and friends war footing for. So in other words, I'm sticking with your framing, right? Because I think it's smart. So we could use the metals and metals refining relationship, for example, with countries around the world. We are snubbing Indonesia, for example, right? And Indonesia produces half of the battery grade nickel in the world, and they also have a lot of cobalt. The cobalt comes in conjunction with the nickel, and the reason we're doing this is that Chinese companies, Tsingtao and so on, when they set up on Sulawesi Island, their labor and environmental practices are like what the U.S. was doing in the 1950s. You know, really dirty and also not very friendly to labor. So because of our politics, our sensibilities, we're no Indonesia, and there's a lot of politics here about that too. This is brain dead, right? So we can establish relationships, establish a relationship with Indonesia and not allow it to become an effective province of China by simply saying any deal that we do for our nickel supply will observe labor standards and environmental standards, and we're not doing that, and it's like a religion. It's pretty crazy. I was in front of some U.S. government people 2 weeks ago at a conference. They were from the Defense Department, and I asked this question: why are you hostile to Indonesia? Can't we do a deal that results in the U.S. getting the nickel, getting the processed nickel, and meeting the standards? And you can see them very uncomfortable in their seats. But I think this is around the world. This is an example of what's going on around the world. We need to establish battery diplomacy, right? And I don't see it. I don't see us doing it yet.
Yeah, so I'm going to go back a little bit in history. In 1954, the United States was 25% or more reliant on other countries for 21 mineral commodities. Today, they're reliant on other countries for 58. And it's a whopping 75% or more reliant on other countries for 39 elements. In this era of electrification that has dawned, how do you see the U.S. government handling domestic sources of metals and minerals that for many decades have been unminable and inaccessible due to the environmental and political roadblocks that have been put up?
Yeah. This is a very good point, we're a NIMBY nation, so we want our products, but we don't want the the process of getting there anywhere near us.
Right.
And people in our country, it's not just that we don't want any of it near us. People in the country will fly to another state across the country to make sure that no one has that plant near them. And it's I mean, I'm going to use the language. I think it's not a moral stance, right? What you're doing is you're exporting your dirty industries to other countries, and you're saying it's okay for them to have it. We're just going to avail of the clean product that results at the end. So I do think we need a mental shift in the U.S. And it's not just that. There's more of it. There's a kind of a workforce stigma as well. I think it's changing a bit, but it has been for a long time. Young people not wanting to work in those kinds of industries. They want to work at Twitter and Google, and that's good. But a lot of people. I mean, there is a pride. I think there is a pride, right, in industry. And, I don't know how you build that back, how you infuse in people, hey, this is something noble too, right? And yeah, sorry, I can see.
Yeah, but no, it's fine. I just wanted to bring up the point or the question to you that, as we're going deeper and deeper into this world of electrification, you have almost 2 billion citizens in India that need to be brought up to that middle class to have air conditioning and vehicles and just basic stuff. China is advancing and they're the manufacturing hub for the world. I mean, everybody is moving towards electrification. So now there's this hyper competition for these raw materials that are needed to pull it off. Yet here is the United States saying, we're not touching what's in our backyard. So we're really kind of putting ourselves in a very difficult situation, no?
Yeah, part of the Inflation Reduction Act is to fund mining and processing, but it's this not in my backyard. It's the people. It's Americans who won't, who are stretching out the time it takes to do these kinds of projects for a decade or more, right? And the risk, right? The investment risk that goes along with that. If you're the investor, are you going to put tens of millions, hundreds of millions? The Lithium Americas project in Nevada, which took I think 14 years to get to approval, more than $2 billion. I think it's $2.5 billion. But anyway, so are you going to put that amount of money behind that if it's going to take that long? Right. And so I wanted to say that, but I also wanted to say, Gary, that we're not going to get there if we're relying only on the United States. It is important for us to establish industries here, but it has to be the U.S. and allies. That's how we get there, and that's just smart geopolitics, also, right? I mean, should we let China run around forming all of the alliances around the world, and we have none?
No. So you're making a great point here, Steve. The biggest current problem, to your point right there, facing the U.S. in this arena of metals and minerals extraction is that the production of these commodities is really extremely concentrated and mostly in the wrong countries. For instance, Russia is the top producer of palladium in the world. It's also the second largest producer of nickel, the third of cobalt, the fifth of graphite, all of which are necessary for battery production. Then there's China, who controls a lot of the mineral metal production, including rare earths, which are critically required for semiconductor chips that power everything electronic. Cut off access to those metals, there's no more smartphones, computers, TVs, or any other system that depends on the chips to operate. Even AI, with its insatiable hunger for more chips, would become untrainable and unusable. So what do you see transpiring because of the USA's, weak position in the metals and minerals extraction area? Do you see higher inflation, shortages, bottlenecks? What do you see coming?
Yeah, yeah. Well, so we are. I'm not. It is true what you've said about Russia. Russia, for example, nickel. It does produce 11% of the battery grade nickel, but there's also Indonesia. I mean, there are other places, Australia, Canada, with that. But the problem is China, and how are we going to compete there? And China has, kind of in retaliation for our clamping down on its access to the most advanced computer chips, has clamped down on the export of gallium and germanium, which both used in chips, and then also graphite made it far more difficult to obtain graphite. And as we already said, China produces effectively 100% of the processed graphite used in batteries. So they know that they've got that grip. Whoops, sorry. They know that they have that grip on the supply of these metals. It's right. We need to build it up. We need to build up competing processing for these metals. Rare earths. Is there a world in which China doesn't control the rare earth supply? I mean, so it's not that China controls the supply of the rare earths. Rare earths are everywhere. It's the processing. China controls 98% of the process. It's a dirty, really dirty industry. I don't know how you create an alternative quickly. One thing I've been saying is that the battle we're fighting, because we're late into this battle, the battle we're fighting is not for the 2020s. China owns the 2020s. We're fighting for the 2030s. We're fighting for the 2040s.
So let's stick on China for a moment, just to give a sense of how dominant Chinese production has become. The UK has a list of 18 critical metals needed for arming their weapons and military. China's the largest producer of 12 of those. They've also established a vice grip on the U.S. being the largest source of imports for several of the critical metals needed for our weapons and military, for instance, the semiconductor metals. So, to your point, the message seems clear. The weapons and military metals race, it's on. And it seems like it's a winner take all. So, we may be playing for the 20s and 2030s and 2040s, but Steve, how do you see this really playing out?
Yeah. So I'm not a pessimist in terms of this becomes hot war. Like I do hear smart people I respect forecasting that inevitably the U.S. ends up in a hot war over Taiwan with China. That's what this is all about. I should say militarily, that's what it's all about. Otherwise, it's all about the U.S. Being uncomfortable with China rising up as an equal rival in geopolitics, right? We want the world to run by U.S. rules. We're uncomfortable with Chinese rules, and so we're resisting, and that's what the bifurcation is all about. I guess I'm going to end up sounding like a naive, person, rose-colored person. I think it kind of works out. I think, over time, we get through this period, and somehow there are, modus vivendi emerge, and we push through. We don't go into actual war with China over Taiwan, and we do end up having access to the metals and the minerals we need. But that doesn't mean that it happens of its own accord. We need to be super smart. China will respond. Remember, if I can just remind of history, in 2010, there was the emergence of a rare earths conflict, right? Remember the East China Sea and Japan and China. It was a fishing boat thing, right? A Japanese fishing boat rammed a Chinese one. I mean, these are just dudes out there in the waters fishing. So it's not like naval boats, but rammed. A bunch of guys got knocked into the water. Well, Japan and China have a history. Like, China doesn't really hates. Chinese hate Japan over what happened during the 1930s. They haven't forgotten, right? And so when that happened, it turned into quite a conflict. China cut off the rare earths to Japan, and that meant, since electronics at that time were concentrated in Japan, that had its impact on the U.S. There were months of no rare earths shipments. When the U.S. and Malaysia and also Australia started up the process of establishing rival rare earths companies and projects in the Death Valley of California, in Malaysia, China reversed itself, pulled down the blockade. So just the threat, if we get our act together on metals and show that we're serious about having alternative supplies, suddenly relations with China, the supply of these metals, will the problems will lift. That's what history shows.
Well, let's hope that's the case. With the BRICS forming, the union that they have, and with many of them, as emerging markets rising, they may not need or rely on the U.S. market the same way as they did back in 2010. And if that's the case, they may not respond similarly as they did back then. I think the bigger question, and you may have some insight into this, is if China truly does establish this longer term beachhead, through the rest of the 2020s, and the market really is tilted more towards them. And I'm not saying it's solely them, it'll be bifurcated, but shifted towards them. Will the U.S. play by a bifurcated rule set instead of the dominant, unipolar world that they've been used to exerting their influence over for so many decades?
Yeah. And when you say that, when you ask that question, Gary, what does a bifurcated rule set look like?
Well, I think a bifurcated rule set, to me, looks like one where China is transacting in other currencies and settling in gold and not the U.S. dollar. They and their transacting countries that they're doing business with maybe are not buying U.S. treasuries with, extra overage, profits to store the money in. They are using alternative banking systems, and they are transacting without the U.S. being a part of the transaction, as the U.S. has been the center of every transaction, for so long. So it just seems like the world is shifting somewhat, and I'm not saying it's a guarantee or it's entirely happening or will happen, but a bifurcated rule set to me looks like when the United States is transacting with folks, it'll be under the way things look now. But when everybody is transacting with each other outside, and not with the United States, those rules will look different. So anyway, I don't know if that explains it to you, but
No, I see what you're saying. So I do have a couple thoughts on that. That history also shows, that traders do look for, a common currency, and the dollar has been that currency, especially since World War II. The U.S. Has the U.S. is trying to slow down. That's our strategies. We're attempting to slow down this process, and that's where we play this game. Where the Chinese bitterly complain that the U.S. is trying to contain its rise. And the U.S. says it's not. Of course, the U.S. is. That's exactly what the U.S. is attempting to do. And the U.S. Says that it's no. We're friends and all of that. We're not really friends. And so that's true. But so we're trying to slow that down so we can stay on top longer, but also while we get our act together. We don't have continuity between presidential administrations. It would be very helpful if we did. The other thing, though, is that we're our own worst enemy. When we put sanctions, we invite Russia and China to take the kind of actions that you describe by imposing sanctions on everyone, right? And that makes them want to have an alternative system. Like, can we start over with the sanctions? Like, get rid of all of them and just one by one, like, which are the ones that actually do make sense? I think I saw it somewhere. It's like, there are dozens of sanctions. I mean, different ones, not just on one country. Yeah.
Steve, it's like, it seems really hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube once it's out, though.
Yeah.
So you recently shared a social media post that you did not write, but it stated, in this month's battery materials review, we explain why we think it's time to go full bull on lithium equities and which segments to focus on. Well, yesterday, Mnt&x, a lithium battery manufacturer, they laid off 1/3 of their staff. So what is the Mnt&x layoff story saying about the lithium industry as a whole, or the battery industry as a whole? And is it no longer the time to go full bull on lithium equities?
Okay. So that the Mnt&x story is about batteries, and it's about silicon. I mean, that their product is a silicon anode right now, and I think this is where it'll end up. It's for personal electronic devices like smartphones, and they've come up with a method to contain the swelling of silicon, and you get this huge boost in energy capacity by using silicon. And in a smartphone, it means it lasts a lot longer. It not only lasts a lot longer, but all of those programs that you want to have on that phone get enabled, and they don't completely drain the battery in it, in half an hour. And also other, those I'm forgetting the name. These new devices.
Yeah, like the Oculus.
Okay, exactly. What is the name of these? What's the generic name of these devices?
Yeah.
Well, whatever it is. Yeah, whatever it is. Though a lot of those can't operate because
virtual reality.
Yeah. Virtual AV and VR, right. AR, VR, and so anyway, that's what this is all about. The layoff. So I think online, I am taking so much heat for that story. I wrote that story yesterday. I broke that story about the layoffs. My Twitter feed is filled with haters. But that is Mnt&x shifting its production, its business, basically from the United States to Malaysia. Where is the production of electronics. It's in Asia, right? Their customers are going to be in Asia. So that's what's going to happen. But labor stories do matter in the United States, right? The whole world is not about investors. It's not about, well, I put all of my grandmother's money in Enovix, and now you're pissing all over my company. Why are you doing that? Right? It's about the people who lost their jobs. That's what that story is about.
So this is more about them shifting production overseas versus the lithium industry as a whole.
Well, so lithium. This is not a lithium story. It's when you're saying lithium, what you really mean that as a proxy for battery, correct? Lithium and all the metals that go into a battery.
Yes.
Yeah, but yes, it's a story about shifting abroad. There still is risk with that, with Enovix. Like, we don't know, like, how big will that scale up? How many customers will they actually get? How deep of a market will that become? Will it justify the money that and the time, right? That company started.
I think the reason why I was asking about the Enovix layoffs was more towards the Lithium Bull, because that the writer of the story, of the other story, that now's the time to invest in lithium equities, combined with the timing of the Enovix layoffs, just is curious. So I'm just saying, is it still, are we at the beginning or the second coming of a Lithium Bull like we were a couple of years ago?
Yeah. So that's Matt Fernley who writes that. He's superb, and a call out to him and his publication. So I don't give advice for investment, but I'm going to state my opinion.
Yeah, please.
And that's that. Look, lithium equities are either at a bottom or near a bottom, right? They have dropped more than 80%, in some cases 90%. So, so you can make a very strong case that if you have a long timeline, right? So Matt says this, right? If you have a long timeline, a longish timeline, like you're not a day trader, then now is a good time to get in.
Right.
Yeah,
that was really why I was asking.
Yeah. But I want to say one other thing that he also says that I think is smart is you've got to go in and out. It's not a buy and hold. So get in when it goes up. Don't get greedy. Take your profit.
Take your profits and move on.
And then wait. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for the clarification. Recently at Auto China 2024, CATL unveiled the world's first battery that achieves a range above 1,000 kilometers, and with a 4C super fast charging, it literally can deliver a 600 kilometer range in just 10 minutes of charging. So that far surpasses the usual batteries available on the market. Owners can be driving on their long trip to see relatives, go on vacation, pull into a charging station, set up their car to be charged, go into the store, use the restroom, stretch their legs, buy a snack, come back to their car, and it's fully charged, literally in just a few short minutes, similar to going to a gas station today. Steve, how much of a game changer is this Chinese battery, and what will it do to the American EV manufacturers such as Tesla, whose batteries don't get close to the distance, nor can they be charged even close to this 10-minute time frame? In fact, the disparity between the two batteries in charging and distance is kind of laughable at this point.
All right. So I have looked at this battery, and the first thing is that we need to do the math. So the range on this battery is 1,000 kilometers. So 1,000 is good, easy to do math with, right? So first thing you have to do is divide that by 1.6 and turn it into miles. Then, right, the Chinese system for assessing the range for a battery is different from the U.S. one, which is by the EPA. So then you have to multiply it by 0.4, right, to get the US system. It's a 375-mile battery.
Well, that's not exactly what they're advertising, is it?
Right, right. And then, I mean, 375 miles is still good, but 1,000 sounds better, right? And so,
Right.
okay, so that's one thing. And then you got the 600 kilometers, and you're adding like around 175 or 200 miles in 10 minutes, which is still a lot. That's still a lot. But let's deal with the real numbers. And if you have we don't know what that battery is, right? We don't know. I think that it is they mainly make lithium iron phosphate. It's an iron-based battery, not the nickel-based one that most that most Western car makers use. And then because it has that extra range, like most LFP batteries, the one I just named, get you like 260, maximum 300. They're getting 375, and so they've doped it with manganese, probably, right, to get that. So that kind of battery is called LMFP, and so that's what we're dealing with. And that and then what are they doing? Usually to get that fast charging, graphite. If you've got a graphite battery, it gets gummed up in fast charging because the lithium can't get into the anode fast enough, and it ends up coating the outside of the anode. It gums up the battery, and the battery doesn't last as long. So therefore, that anode is something else too. It's probably they've got a lot of silicon in it. Silicon can charge a lot faster. And so we do have, the U.S. does have silicon anode makers. So I think U.S. companies can get there also, but they haven't. So we're not Chinese companies, and CATL is much faster about developing and being willing to commercialize what it makes than Western battery makers and Western automakers. We can't compete, but we should move faster. We need to move faster. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So in a recent post you wrote, should iron-based batteries be a national security priority? Would you speak a little bit deeper into that for us?
Yeah.
And when you subscribe, we want to give you a free gift. It's the report that we wrote based on the important Ray Dalio foundational premise titled, "If you don't own gold, you know neither history nor economics." This free gift is a must read for everyone on why we all should own gold. So head over to metalsandminers.substack.com, put in your email address, and subscribe and receive the free gift on us.